It is time for your fantasy football playoffs. The word for you today is proactive. It's time for FF Champs on Football Nation. Hi, everybody. I'm Butch Stearns. He's Billy Enright of FFChamps.com. Proactive, Billy. It's the playoffs, the waiver wire. You may not pick somebody up to win your whole championship, but you just might. But what you're saying is this is sort of like setting a baseball roster for the playoffs. You want to be proactive. You want to look ahead here, don't you?
Absolutely. One of my favorite shows on TV is that Doomsday Prepper show where they're preparing for the end of the world. That's what fantasy football managers want to do for weeks 14, 15, and 16. Prepare for the worst, expect the best, but just be proactive in who you're picking up. It really applies to running backs the most. You want your handcuffs. It is so important. Think of the example with LaShawn McCoy and Bryce Brown. Bryce Brown having a ridiculous 2-game stretch, 4 touchdowns, over 350 yards. A lot of fantasy managers were expecting to have LaShawn McCoy leading them into the playoffs, but they're proactive in their approach, had the handcuff, had the insurance policy for LaShawn McCoy. Bryce Brown would have already been on their rosters. We're going to get into some of that today.
So part of being proactive, part of this mentality is you have to take that side of your brain that's been stashing those deep rosters with positions, 18, 19, and 20. It's time to cut bait with those guys.
You got to cut your fat this time of season. Your 5th or 6th wide receiver, they're not going to help you out in their playoffs. Your 2nd or 3rd tight end, just go with your studs right now. Go with your true starters. Cut the fat. Trim up and get your insurance policies, get your handcuffs.
Okay, so again, every week we look at waiver wire pickups. This is the first week of the playoffs, and there are still, let's start with quarterbacks, some guys out there who could impact you in the playoffs.
With quarterbacks, you want to go with the players that have a high upside. The backup for Tom Brady, Ryan Mallett, he's not going to help you out in the fantasy playoffs if Brady were to go down. Instead, for quarterbacks, you want to go after the high upside guys. Perfect example, Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. 293 yards, 2 touchdowns in week 13. He also had 71 rushing yards against a great Bears defense. He has the Arizona Cardinals and the Buffalo Bills coming up on his next 2 games. Great matchups for Russell Wilson. And you also want to look at a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who's been hurt the last couple of weeks, been dropped in a lot of fantasy leagues out there. We know what Big Ben can do when he's on the field. Those are the guys you want to go after for the quarterback position.
And now let's go to the running back position. And you mentioned that on draft day, people often don't think about handcuffing their guys. But now if you're in the playoffs and you're heading to, it's time to revisit those conversations.
It absolutely is. It's one of our 10 commandments for winning fantasy football. You have to have the handcuffs for your stud running backs. So who am I talking about here? Toby Gerhart for Adrian Peterson. Remember last year? Peterson went down with an injury. Gerhart did an excellent job filling in for him, filled that void nicely. Big shoes to fill, but Gerhart is certainly capable of producing quality stats to help you in your fantasy leagues in case that Peterson went down with an injury. Justin Forsett and Ben Tate, they're perfect handcuffs if you have Arian Foster. Obviously, you don't want to risk not being able to pick up these guys later on in the season if Foster were to go down. Pick them up now. Be proactive. If you have Ray Rice, get Bernard Pierce on your squad. You have Marshawn Lynch, go out and get Robert Turbin. If you have Stephen Ridley, make sure you have Shane Vereen as the backup. The list goes on. We have them all at ffchamps.com.
And then when we go to wide receivers, you sort of have the same theory. But again, like quarterbacks, it might not be the backup who's actually on that team. Or is it? It's both situations, isn't it?
It really can be both situations. We saw Donnie Avery have 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if you have Reggie Wayne, we know he's getting a little bit older. Maybe his body starts to break down in the final weeks of the season. Donnie Avery, suitable backup for Reggie Wayne. Maybe Julian Edelman if you have Wes Welker. But some other high upside guys at the wide receiver position that could be dangling out there. Someone like Golden Tate of the Seattle Seahawks. 230 yards, 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Sidney Rice, his teammate, may miss some time with a concussion, so we like Golden Tate's possibility of getting more targets. And then how about Chris Givens of the St. Louis Rams? 16 receptions, 207 yards, and 1 touchdown in his last 2 games. We know Danny Amendola may be out for a significant chunk of time with that foot injury. Chris Givens has been hot favorite target for Sam Bradford.
All right, Billy, let's talk about tight ends right now. A lot of people lost Rob Gronkowski like me. I took your advice, picked up one of the tight ends that you're advising. They're still out there in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, Brandon Myers, the guy from the Oakland Raiders, available in 47% of leagues out there. And you know what? He had a great game in Week 13. 14 receptions, 130 yards, and a touchdown. And what I like about Myers is Carson Palmer targets him a lot every week. He gets 8 to 12 targets every single week. And 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's been turning in those targets into a lot of receptions, a lot of yards, and a quality fantasy production. Someone else that's staying hot is Jacob Tamme of the Denver Broncos. 9 receptions, 89 yards in Week 13. 4 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown in Week 12. Peyton Manning is starting to get more trust in his tight end, Jacob Tamme.
All right, Billy, so waiver wire pickups heading into the playoffs. Again, remind people about ffchamps.com and all the things you have at their disposal.
You can subscribe to our videos right here on YouTube. We give great advice every week. Waiver wire, fantasy rewind, start 'em, sit 'em. But most of all, check out ffchamps.com. We got our weekly rankings. Free offer right now. If you prepay for 2013, you get the rest of 2012 for free. We want to help everyone bring home that championship, get the bragging rights, and most of all, win that cash for your fantasy leagues.
You heard him. He's Billy Enright of ffchamps.com. Check out the website to help win your fantasy league. It's playoff times, folks. As Bill Parcells says, it's tournament time. This is FF Champs on Football Nation.